Hello and welcome to our webinar, ADU Building Roundtable with Local Experts. This event is being simultaneously translated into Spanish. Este evento está siendo transmitido en vivo en español. To access that feature, click on the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen. Para acceder a este servicio, a favor de oprimir el botón abajo de su pantalla y seleccionar el botón para español. We thank Gabriel Gutierrez, who is offering our audience live Spanish interpretation. Le damos las gracias a Gabriel Gutiérrez, que nos brinda la interpretación al español esta tarde. I will let Gabriel take the interpretation from here.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Scott Johnson, and I'm the ADU expert for the Napa-Sonoma ADU Center, as well as the founder of Pocket Housing LLC. I've studied urban planning and economics at Sonoma State University and worked for more than a decade as an environmental analyst on planning and housing issues across California. The fires of 2017 and the changes in land use and zoning laws have inspired me to put those ideas to work at home in Sonoma County. I've always been a staunch advocate for equitable housing and believe there is an amazing opportunity to recover from our housing crisis with ADUs. So I founded Pocket Housing to help homeowners move from thought to action in building their ADUs. I'm joined this evening by several wonderful folks who I'll be introducing to you later. I do want to say a special thanks to Amity, our admin support superwoman who's taking care of all the behind the scenes Zoom logistics for us. And speaking of Zoom logistics, we invite the audience to submit a question using the Q&A function available at the bottom of your screen. Questions will be tackled at the end of the webinar. In addition, we're going to be inviting you to answer a couple of polls that will be launching over the course of the webinar. So get ready to interact with us throughout the next 90 minutes. Tonight, we're really excited about the discussion. We're going to share a little bit about what the Napa-Sonoma ADU Center does, and then I'm going to lead a roundtable discussion with a couple of local building professionals on key ADU tips and issues when you get to constructing your ADU. And then after that, we'll open it up to the audience for live questions and answers. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available later on demand on our website, probably by next week. So before we move on, I'd love to take a moment to hear from you all briefly. We're pulling up a poll here, and I'd love if you take 30 seconds to answer it. The poll is anonymous, and the results will help us in our mission. Make sure to scroll all the way down to see the whole poll, and feel free to select more than one option. Then at the end, hit submit. So, Fricker, what are your goals for building an ADU? Rental income, housing for a family member, planning for retirement, and several other options. So let you guys fill out that poll. Okay. So we got the poll results back, and it looks like we have a tie between housing for our family member and planning for retirement. And the ADU Center, often we get to go out and do site visits for homeowners and help them with their ADU projects when they're getting started. And those are the top two that I end up talking to people about is housing for a family member and planning for retirement. So it's great to see those numbers in the poll as well. This will help us better understand what you're thinking about when you're looking at ADUs and your needs, and that we can better tailor our mission and our information that we provide to homeowners for ADUs. There are a number of benefits of ADUs. Some of you are probably aware of these if you're here tonight. We like to say that the key benefits are flexibility, family, and financial security for local homeowners. In addition, our vision is that ADUs can provide homes for people who live and work here that are at 50 to 80% of the area median income. Right now, about 30% of the folks who work in Sonoma County and 50% of the folks who live in Napa County commute from outside the county to work. We'd like them all to be able to afford to live and work here. I could elaborate, but I think you probably have your own great insights into the benefits of ADUs. And if you don't, you will after hearing some more of the excellent panelists tonight. So This is being put on by the Napa Sonoma ADU Center, and it is our mission to help homeowners build ADUs. Napa Sonoma ADU Center is a fiscally sponsored project of the Napa Valley Community Foundation with support from the Community Foundation of Sonoma County. We collaborate with local jurisdictions, nonprofits, and the private sector with the goal of increasing housing affordability in our communities. Regardless of what your goals are for building an ADU, we believe that we are here to help. We can help anyone who wants to build an ADU on their property for any reason. And very quickly, there are multiple types of ADUs, as you can see from this slide. And thanks to the California state laws that went into effect in January 2020, most homeowners are now eligible to build both an ADU and a junior ADU, which is also included on this slide. So tonight we're going to talk about some building tips relevant to building multiple different types of ADUs. But on our website, we have a number of resources for those interested in building an ADU. We have an ADU calculator, which helps estimate the costs, potential returns, and the benefits associated with building an ADU. We have city rules, so you can look up the city standards by your jurisdiction for ADUs in all the cities and unincorporated places in Napa and Sonoma County. We have an address lookup tool, which helps identify if you can build an ADU on your property. The vast majority of you can. We have a digital version of our ADU workbook, which helps homeowners in Napa and Sonoma counties through the design, planning, permitting, and building and rental process of an ADU. There is a tremendous amount of great information and exercises in this workbook. We have started our vendor list, which is builders, designers, architects, prefab companies, and more, and it's growing all the time. And of course, we're giving webinars. This is one of many that we've given, which are available live and are also recorded and available from our website. We cover such things as ADUs 101, how to build an ADU in Healdsburg, how to build in some of the other jurisdictions that we've covered. In May, we had a roundtable discussion with a pair of designers and architects. So there's a tremendous amount of information contained in the webinars. Um, uh, in the ADU workbook, which we have that helps homeowners in Napa City counties, again, it's when you do a site visit, when you ask for someone to come along, usually me, to take a look at your property, you also get a hard copy of the workbook at that time. Um, the calculator tool, which we can see here. This is a sample of the kind of information that you can give it, and it will give you a breakdown of your costs, potential expenses, and potential rents. And there's a lot of interesting details in the different tabs on this calculator, and I strongly encourage you, if you're thinking about building an ADU, to get very familiar with this calculator. It's being updated all the time as we get new information from around the Bay Area. Um, our address lookup tool. Like I said, this helps you determine if you can build an ADU on your property. There are a couple of areas in Sonoma and Napa counties where you can't build an ADU, but the vast majority of you can. This tool will help you figure that out very quickly. And then we also support homeowners. You can reach out to us with questions you may have related to your ADU project or hopes. We have developed relationships with local planning and building departments, so we can help get information that may be otherwise hard to find out if you haven't run through this process before. And that's our contact information. So feel free to contact us, email us if you've got questions about your project. And then we do, as I said before, we do feasibility reports. So this is where, as I say, typically I come out to your property. Once you filled out a questionnaire, sort of outlining what you're thinking of for your ADU, um, then we do a little bit of pre-screening on your property to get a little more information so that when we show up, we're somewhat familiar. And then we talk about, what you're hoping to build. And we have both in-person site visits and virtual site visits now for these consults. And the virtual site visits, they tend to get scheduled a little faster. There are more times open for the virtual site visits, but we could also do it in person. And then once we've talked about your project, I go away and I do deeper research. And if there are questions that come up that I can't answer in person, I contact a local jurisdiction and we talk about whatever that question is, and then we put all the answers and a lot more information into a ADU feasibility report that is detailed for your property with your goals in mind. Um, Yeah, so it's a really great program. I encourage you all, if you're thinking about it, doing an ADU, to sign up on our website. The web address there is at the bottom, and then we have a new program called the ADU Home Match Program. And the Home Match Program is a new project for us. It's currently launching with the support of the nonprofit Burbank Housing. ADU Home Match is a program designed to help local landlords match tenants in need of a home and support every step of the way through the process. We've been doing this for a little while now, and very often when we're talking to homeowners, they're focused on the build. And it takes a lot of focus and attention to get the build going and completed, but not as many of them are thinking about the long-term aspects of being a landlord. We believe that accessory dwelling units can help create much-needed housing for the people who live and work in our communities. And as part of the ADU Home Match program, the ADU landlords agree to a minimum 1 year lease agreement and to rent the ADU at an affordable rate for a local tenant who is 65% of the area median income or below. And this really helps the resiliency of our communities. This means, for example, a local preschool teacher, dental assistants, mail carrier, healthcare support worker, or social worker. That's the kind of income category that we're looking at with 65% area median income or below. Um, the benefits that the ADU landlords will receive by enrolling in this program include in-depth screening of potential tenants. It's conducted by experts and tailored matching of 2 to 3 tenants that match with the ADU that you're going to lease, and an ADU landlord helpline for assistance with any questions you may have regarding landlord best practices and lease agreements as they arise. This is a huge benefit for someone who's never been a landlord before. Landlords are also enrolled in the ADU Home Edge program will be eligible to receive up to $2,500 of loss mitigation funds for 1 month of lost rent and security deposit coverage. You can apply if you're interested at our ADU Home Match program on our website, and Amity is going to put the link in the chat. So if you're to the point where you're looking at, going through your ADU build and you're thinking about becoming a landlord, the Home Match program is a really, really helpful resource for you. So we're going to be jumping into the roundtable in just another moment, but I want to do one more poll before we get to the roundtable. And again, this is anonymous. These are, what are your primary concerns about the ADU process? This is the cost, the difficulty of permit approval, difficulty of construction management, privacy, site constraints, challenges of renting and managing the ADU, potential conflict with your neighbors, and scrutiny from the planning and permitting department in the process. So again, scroll down, make sure you can see all the options. You can choose more than one, and we'll give you a little bit longer to pick out what are your primary concerns, and then we'll see what the numbers look like. Okay. So it looks like the top one is difficulty of permit approval, which is understandable because it's a pretty opaque process if you've never been through it before. And that's one of the things that we talk about in depth when we come out to do a site visit for your ADU project, is sort of step you through, let you know kind of what it's going to look like to get you through that process. Our workbook as well has a ton of great information. So this is really good. Cost is also high up there, understandably. And it looks like the next highest one there is scrutiny from the planning and permitting department. Well, again, we try and demystify that. We've had webinars with permitting and planning departments from around Napa and Sonoma counties. I encourage you to take a look at them. And we also, to sort of describe the process, and in fact, I'm about to describe it right now with in our ADU process map in just a moment. So thank you so much for filling out those two surveys. It's really helpful for us to understand kind of where you're coming from. I also want to make sure that you're aware of the many other resources that we offer for homeowners included in building an ADU. This is just one webinar of many. As I've said before, here's some topics that we've covered before. How to finance is a really interesting one as well. Our blog is constantly being updated with new information, different topics from around the ADU world, and how they apply to the local communities. And all of this webinar and all previous webinars are available via the blog, and we also have a ton of frequently asked questions as well. Emily's pasting links to all this stuff in the chat. So if you want to hold on to these links after the webinar, copy and paste them into a note or into your web browser so that you've got them for later. We also love to hear stories about people who've built ADUs. And so we get to hear from a lot of people who build ADUs, and I've said this in other webinars, you'll see if you haven't seen them already, every ADU project is unique. Every story ends up being unique. But we do like to try and collect those stories, and we like to feature them on our website so people can see, yes, it's possible. Whatever unique circumstances you have, you can build your ADU anyway. So we have a series of stories with photos, videos, floor plans, all at the link on this current slide. And then I mentioned just a few moments ago about the ADU process. This is the process map. It's fairly simplified, but it gives you an idea of the roadmap that you need to go through to build an ADU. We go over this in much greater detail in our ADU 101 webinar, which I believe is linked in the chat. And I highly encourage you to check it out if you haven't seen it already. We cover a tremendous amount of information in that webinar. Sort of to put today's conversation about ADU building in context, I want to ground us here with a note that ADU construction takes place after pre-development, design, and permitting stages of the ADU journey. So we're at arrow number 4 here for tonight. Pre-development is where the Napa Sonoma ADU Center does most of its services. Most of it's a step 0. It's where you think about your ADU goals. It's where you consider what's possible, what makes sense, and what's feasible. And we help answer questions and sort of outline the map, so to speak, for what makes sense for your property. This includes our feasibility consult, and the calculators and all the other resources we have. This gets you set up for success from the start before you spend money and hire a professional team. Then you go through design development, which is where you're working with architect and engineers to really make the ADU take shape. And then permitting, which is where the city gets to look at your plans and offer comments. And this is usually a back and forth for a couple of rounds. But at the end of permitting, you get your building permit. And then you get into construction, which is where I think a lot of people like to spend a lot of time imagining what construction is going to be like. And so tonight, we are going to be talking about that in particular. But when the construction process is over, you get to move in, you get to find a tenant or provide housing for your family, and you are a landlord after that. But construction is often as much of a black box as the whole permitting process is. So tonight, I want to introduce you to our panelists. We're going to be discussing sort of the details about building ADUs, common missteps, things to consider. Both are local experts, and they have a lot of wisdom to share with us. First up is Sky Barnett. Sky was raised working in the trades. He's now a construction professional with over 20 years experience in private as well as public sectors. He's built a lot of things, not just homes. He's restored award-winning wooden boats. He's built houses of all sizes from 160 to 10,000 square feet. And he's also produced events and built things for events. He's worked with jurisdictions all over Northern California. So he has a really broad experience in the construction industry. And he's always enjoyed finding creative solutions to all of life's adventures, as he says. The second building professional we have tonight is Dustin Deason. Dustin has been building over 20 years and worked on small remodel projects up to multi-million-dollar estates. He's lived in Sonoma County for 22 years and has been married for 23 years and has 3 children here. Both Sky and Dustin have built ADUs, multiple ADUs in Sonoma County, and I believe maybe Napa as well for Dustin. So they've got a lot of good local experience that they can share with us tonight. And so the things that we want to cover tonight are going to be sort of how to find the right builder, things to know about the construction process, costs, sort of how to control them, and common mistakes that homeowners can make during thinking about costs for their build. And so we're just going to jump right in. And I think the one that I get asked most often, as I've said in other webinars, I sort of get asked 3 things when I do a home consult: is what can I build, how much is it going to cost, and do you know anybody I can hire? And finding contractors is a real big hurdle for a lot of homeowners who are getting into this process. So, from your perspective as builders, how should people pick their builder? What's some sort of best practices for them to figure out who's going to be a good builder for them? And you guys are both muted, by the way. So
There
I'll
we
throw it to
go.
Dustin first. There we go.
Can you hear me? There we go.
Yes.
I think from my experience, speaking as a builder, I think communication is one of the biggest issues. I think you need to find a builder who who you can communicate with, and I don't mean just talk to. I mean who understands you, and when you say something, can repeat back to you kind of what you're saying, and that you're generally in sync on a lot of things. Not all people get along with all people. And so getting along with your builder, it's a long process. And there's the warranty process that comes afterwards. So getting along with your builder, I think, is a big one. And then transparency. I think knowing what your costs are upfront as much as possible, and where the money goes, and what the timing is. I think all those things are really fall under that umbrella of communication for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree with Dustin 100% on all of that. Communication is key to everything. And the only thing that I think I could even a little bit add to that would be finding a contractor whose sort of style of construction and past projects fit with the style that you like. Someone that's going to sort of work with what you want, and sort of fit not only as in their communication but also in their aesthetics. Helps a lot as well.
And this actually echoes, for those of you who've seen the webinar with the designers, this echoes exactly what both the designer and architect were saying, is that the personal communication, the ability to sort of match aesthetically was really, really important. And honestly, when I first heard it, it kind of surprised me, but thinking about it in the construction projects I've been involved with, it's absolutely true. As I think about it, I just hadn't thought about it through that lens. So, someone's ready to build. Homeowner, they've got, they're working on their design. They know they want to build, within the next year, within the next 6 months. Where can they find contractor to work on their build? How do they, if they do find someone, how do they vet that builder to make their project a success?
I think talking to your friends, talking to your neighbors, builders that have already been working in your neighborhood. Maybe you have somebody down the street got an ADU, whoever did that, they're going to be a great resource because they're going to be familiar with the area. You're going to be able to see the work that they did, and talk to the person about how their experience was. So, just word of mouth is huge for that.
That's something I hear from a lot of homeowners actually when we do the site visits. Is very often when I first talk with them, they'll say, "Oh yeah, my neighbor did one 6 months ago," or there's two ADUs the next street over," and so very local experience. Dustin?
Yeah, well, not much to add to that. I think word of mouth is the best way. Like Sky was saying, it's pretty much agree with everything he said. I would also point you to the Sonoma Napa ADU website, that your host's website.
Thank you.
Has some great resources on it. Yeah, also your architect may be able to help you out. Mainly, I would talk to more than one builder. It's a somewhat of a marriage, and you don't just want to date one person before you walk into
Sign on
that
the dotted line.
relationship, right?
Yeah.
So getting a couple quotes, a couple conversations is a good idea.
Well, and I think that also probably speaks to what Sky was saying, is that you've got to have a rapport with them. You've got to agree with them, and be able to communicate well. And so if your neighbor is a different kind of person who gets along with a different kind of person,
Right.
that GC may not be a good fit for you ultimately. And so in some ways there's sort of I imagine there's kind of a gut instinct or something. And so talking to different GCs is always good. If you can get 3 or 4 numbers together and talk to them about your project, that might help.
I think another part of it, just as we're talking here, is to get an idea of what their processes are too, because there's a lot of things that come about during the building process, like what are we installing? And typically for an ADU, an architect isn't going to, an architect isn't going to give those specifications to you. So what does your builder's process look like in terms of selections. What does it look like in terms of scheduling? What does it look like in terms of payment? All things that aid that communication, and part of that interview process that I think will help you get a sense of what your builder's processes are. Do you understand them? Are they okay at explaining them? And what kind of flexibility exists within those processes?
Yeah, that's a very good point. And when you're interviewing, I mean, ultimately you want to get to the point where you can sign a contract with the builder. And so from contracts, speaking for homeowners who've never done this, they may not have even done a substantial remodel before, and now they're tackling an ADU project, which is, as we say, it's a second house, regardless of how small it is. From the contract perspective, what should a homeowner be aware of if they've never encountered a building contract before? What kind of the parts of a contract are common, or what should they be looking for?
That's a good question. There's a ton of different contracts out there. Time and material. The two most popular are time and material and fixed price. I find that for a lot, and there's a third type, actually. There's a hybrid of the two. I find for smaller projects like an ADU, even for bigger projects, that ultimately it turns into being a hybrid project. There's some costs that we can very easily assess up front, foundation, framing, roofing, and other costs that are harder to assess. What kind of flooring? There's a wide range in selections of materials that can really make the price fluctuate. So typically a fixed contract price is one that I personally favor, with kind of a hybrid of having allowances for items that aren't very clearly defined. But some kind of mechanism to understand what your costs are in a contract, I think, is important. What items are fixed and what are not fixed, and then what's a arbitration process in case things go south, which hopefully they won't by that point, but that's really important. And what are your mechanisms in the contract to, if you have an issue, what does it say in the contract? You don't want to start off on that foot if things are going to go south, but a contract is there to save the relationship, because construction is a process, and that's the way that I approach it. Contracts are to save relationships. So
right. And I think someone once said to me, a contract should be it's an agreement between equals. It should be that there is balance on both sides. There's parity on both sides of the contract, and that it's not just the contractor, it's not just the homeowner who's benefited by a contract. It's both sides reach that. Sky, do you have anything to add to that?
I'm terrified by contracts. That's the only other thing, in addition, would be, it's absolutely okay and worth it to have the contract reviewed by, a lawyer or somebody else. You're going into a project that's, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So spending, $500, $600 to have a lawyer take a look at it and say that, yes, this looks legitimate and okay. Absolutely worth every penny. So.
Right. Now you mentioned about fixed price versus time materials and the hybrid. When before COVID, I think it seemed to be a lot more common for there to be fixed price contracts. And in fact, if you do a Google search, sort of how to pick a contractor, they often say look for a fixed price contract so you don't have this balloon cost that shows up. But all those posts, from what I could tell, were all written before 2020. Which was not just COVID, but also shortage of labor and materials prices and everything else. So, if someone's going to look, Googling, how do I find a contractor? And they're getting a lot of advice saying, it should be a not to exceed or a fixed price contract. Dustin, you mentioned there's kind of a hybrid model in there. What sort of things that, should a homeowner be looking for? Are there things that they should be concerned about in a contract, or things that, deposit size or something like that they should be looking at to say this seems to make sense?
Well, deposit size and some of those things are regulated by the state of California on what can be charged. And there are certain contract requirements that that us as general contractors have to follow. But to your other question, I think, especially now with the fluctuation in commodity prices, I mean, lumber is up, what, 300%? I don't even, depends on what product you're looking at, but it's up a lot. Steel is up, and all these things are up. I mean, I think going back to the basic of what the underlying foundation of what your pricing structure is trying to accomplish is that you need to purchase a product, and the homeowner needs to pay for the product, and the builder needs to execute, on that. And so what happens when you have price fluctuations is you're setting up a price at one time, and by the time you go to purchase the materials, the prices have gone up, and that's
Right.
not fair to the contractor. But then if you ask the contractor, well, I don't want any price changes throughout my job, then the contractor is going to have to look ahead and say, well, what are prices going to be in 6 months? And when you ask a contractor to go that route, well, then your price goes up. And so this is the kind of the underpinnings, I think, of a fixed price versus a time and material contract. You know, so what I've been doing personally, I guess, is I've been using fixed pricing for all the items that have a very clear scope, which is foundation and lumber and stuff. But then with the current commodity price volatility, I've been adding a clause in my contract saying that, listen, once we get ready to execute, that I'm going to reprice. And I have a benchmark where I set my price at the beginning, and then I compare it to that benchmark when I order the material. And then if it's more than that becomes a change order and the homeowner pays, or if it becomes a credit, then it becomes a discount, and then
Right.
the price actually goes down. And I feel like that is one of the fairest ways to do that. But it's just really difficult. Lumber supply price, they're not holding their prices for more than 7 days. And oftentimes you can get your price at the beginning of a process, and then 3 or 4 months later, when you get your permit, the market is radically changed. And so I think, in terms of contracts, having something to deal with price fluctuation, commodity volatility, is one important part of a contract. And then the other part is for anything that's not, if I can't go to the store and if there's not a specific product name, number, serial number specified in the plans, then someone has to pick that during the process. And so
Right.
during the pricing part, then that's what's called an allowance. And I would give you, for a toilet, let's say, I usually give about $200. There can be toilets for $1,000 or $100. So that's what an allowance is for. And then you would go out and find a product that fits within that budget, or one that's over. And if you picked one that's over, then you would pay the extra. And if you picked one that's under, then you would get a credit. And so then I set up a series of allowances for items that aren't picked, which are typically the finishes: plumbing, flooring, cabinets, door handles, doors, and that kind of thing.
Right. So this is actually this sort of like where we get to process, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's the process should be reflected in the contract. And if you get a contract from a GC that, particularly given the last 18 months of what's happened with materials prices, if you're seeing a contract from a GC that doesn't have some allowance for that, I mean, that to me personally, that would be a yellow flag. I mean, I've been following the prices because I'm sort of construction adjacent these days, and the graphs of the price are just, they're crazy. I've never seen anything like it in the construction industry. So that's something to look for. But that's actually a good sign that the contractor is paying attention to the market and is paying attention to pricing, and that they're going to make it so that they're not going to go under while they're building your house, because they're calculating for costs. And so this actually does dovetail right nicely into process. And this, Sky, do you want to tag on to that? You're good.
Yeah, no, that pretty much covered, couldn't have said it better.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, in the building process, I think allowances versus selection is an interesting detail, because we often see, people will ask us, how much does it cost, and we have a really rough, and we stress it's a very, very rough price per square foot, kind of the basement price per square foot for an ADU. and we're going to get to price to square foot in a little bit, I think. But the allowances versus selections, because that very often the ultimate cost is the fit and finish can be 30% of the job, or more. And so, like you said, there's a $100 toilet, and there's a $1,000 toilet, and if it just says toilet, both of those will fit the bill, but one of them is going to have a much bigger effect on the total cost of the job. So, talking, I think, to your, I believe Dustin, it was you who mentioned, in the previous time we talked, that talking to your potential during the interview, your general contractor, about how do they handle allowances versus selections. How is that really getting to the nitty gritty of how does the day-to-day look when you're on the job? What other things in the process do you think homeowners who've never done this before should they be aware of? What things come up?
Well, just kind of going back to what you were just saying about, talking with your contractor about their process. I think one of the things is, dovetailing in with the communication, that your contractor should be willing and should be happy to discuss all of these things with you, because it benefits both of you. And so, if you're trying to have these conversations with your contractor, and they're skirting the subject or ignoring you, that it's not a good sign. So definitely something to talk about and something to be open about the entire process. It should be a good thing that they would appreciate you bringing up with them and asking them about.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, so, one of the things that comes up, I was talking to a homeowner a couple of weeks about this, is they thought they were going to get started a lot sooner because they had their design finished, and to the city, and now they're sort of waiting for their permit. What sort of lead times are you guys seeing out there? What sort of drags on the system are you seeing, because I know that it's a very busy schedule, very busy season.
I'm doing most of my work in the county nowadays, and I'm seeing about 20 weeks.
20 weeks
for permit turnaround. Unless you're a fire rebuild, then you get the fast track.
Right.
But that's what I'm seeing, and I do some work in Santa Rosa, and that's been similar. I want to say 14 to 16, but I'm not my last job in Santa Rosa was a year ago, so I don't know their current permit times. But it's with COVID, a lot of the counties and agencies are still working from home, and the interoffice communication is not there because they can't walk over to the cubicle and talk to people. And so that's been contributing to longer lead times.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that from our little vantage point of just asking them questions. The response time varies dramatically from one jurisdiction to the next. Some jurisdictions are on the ball and we get an answer within 24 hours. Sometimes the staffing just isn't there. The communication, particularly when I'm talking, again, like you said, across departments, the staffing isn't there. The communication isn't there. And so it can often take multiple touches to try and get a response back. Sky, what are you seeing in terms of like during the builds, what sort of delays are out there, things that are throwing people's projects off?
Well, I mean, right now, just all the materials are hard to get. So in addition to pricing, some things are just not available. I'm talking with a friend that was held up for, I think it was 4 months on appliances just because they couldn't get a range and they couldn't get the hood, and so that concrete's been a big issue. It's eased up a little bit, but there was, I think about 6-7 months ago, there was rumors of a barge off the coast that had all the Portland cement no one could get to. It was preventing all the concrete from happening.
So it's like it's the Flying Dutchman legend of concrete.
Yes.
It's out there on the waves, free, never coming to the ground.
Yeah.
I mean,
and also just changing your mind, making decisions, that can be a huge delay, because if you have on your plans that you're using a certain type of window, you have it all set up, and at the 11th hour you decide that you really would rather have fiberglass instead of vinyl windows. and that resets the clock on everything. And so, that sort of goes back to the design and back to the communication and trying to sort of figure out as much as you can before. And it even goes into the, working with the jurisdictions and bringing your plans in, as complete a set of plans as you can have to give to them. You're going to get a quicker, a better review, and hopefully, one review and not multiple.
Right.
So having that is important because, it all, every little minor delay, ripples out, subs are really hard to schedule right now, especially on ADUs because it's a smaller project. And, unfortunately, when people are trying to make their schedules and they're figuring out what they want to do, the job that they can go sit on for 2 weeks and, have all their tools set up and, just show up and work as opposed to the ADU that's maybe going to be 1 or 2, 3 days. They're going to choose the bigger job that makes them more money.
Right.
That's a definite hiccup.
Well, a part of things that I'm seeing from a schedule point of view is, as you said, every little thing can ripple out. One is the availability of labor. I mean, I'm trying to get my windows replaced on my own house, and they're 3 months out. So from finding the right window installer, choosing the window, paying the deposit, then it's 3 months. And so I kind of knew that, again, doing what I do for a living, I was kind of aware it was going to be a wait. And so, for me, it was sort of a setting of expectations was, and trying to back out the time of, okay, I want these done before the rainy season gets here. So I need to start, in May, I guess it was, in order to have them done by the end of the summer. Even though it's going to be, a day's worth of work for the company because there aren't that many windows. And I think for homeowners, it's often, particularly if they haven't done this before, I think the presumption is that sort of the build starts, the GC and his crew shows up and they just work 5 days a week, 7 to 3 or 8 to 4 until the job's done. And that's really not how it works, particularly on smaller projects, because there are, we've said this before, it's a small house, so it touches every one of the trades. If you're building from a detached unit where you've got a foundation and everything else, that it all comes out of the ground, and it's an incredibly complex project for its actual square footage, and trying to keep all those pieces moving and having the guys show up and having the materials show up and having the inspections done at the right schedule when there's lead time for those as well, is a tremendous challenge. And I think Scott, you were saying this last week, was this ties back into communication, is that the GC has got to be able to communicate, what's happening with the schedule, particularly when there are so many things that are outside their control.
Yeah, I'll say tagging on what Sky said about, in terms of communication and in terms of delays on the project, the selection part is a really, he was saying, a really big delay. And I 100% agree. Where, I had a project a year ago that should have been a 2.5 month project, and it stretched into 5. And the owner wouldn't make a selection. And I tried to communicate. I did communicate to her, and I said, well, hey, I need a selection and I would like to have it by such and such date to keep the project rolling. And then, reminder, and then the date came and I was like, hey, I really need to order the product because it's out a ways. And then by the time the product came around, she made a selection a week or 2 later. That's when I was supposed to be installing the product, but now I'm just ordering the product. And so then that pushes out the time frame, and then the person who needed that product installed before they could do theirs, it just has this, pebble in the pond effect going out. And here it gets back to communication. And in this particular case, the homeowner was not under a time frame, and she was actually a really pleasant and great person, and we still communicate even though the project's finished. She's a really great person. But anyway, that she didn't care. I mean, she it wasn't a big priority of her to be on time. So as a contractor, I take that seriously because that's my job. And if the owner wants to not take that so seriously or whatever, that's fine because it's their project, but it's my job to, it's my job to push up against that. And so that goes back to the communication, but also to the delays, and it turned a 2.5, 3 month project into a 5 month project.
And I hear this from I hear from the other side, from homeowners who are thinking about, particularly for people who want to build for family. There's often, from the homeowner side, there's often a very complex, interrelated, highly variable set of circumstances. In many cases, it's a parent, it's a mother-in-law, who will be selling their house in either another part of the country or another part of the state, and moving, and they need to try and sort of do the financing, sell the house, get it on the market, get all that stuff rolling, get that person moved up here, hopefully to have a unit built. And so when there are these delays, and even before COVID, even before the supply line shocks, every construction project I've been involved in at any level has had delays. It's part of the process. There are going to be delays. So you try and plan for that, but I think it's particularly acute right now, and hopefully in the next year the supply lines will start to normalize again. The factories will be put back into production. The planners will be back behind the counter talking with the building department on a regular basis and having lunch together. So hopefully those kinds of the acute problems we're having right now will ease. I assume it's probably about a year to two delayed out from the start of the lockdown. So during the build, what's kind of the best thing for the homeowner, to stay in communication with you? What are the things they should be thinking about when the contractor says, "Hey, we need to make a decision on these windows, cabinets, broom closet doors, whatever"? That's a pretty important piece. What else should they be talking to you about during the build?
I think, well, I mean, there's 4 categories, I think, of stuff that happens during the build. There is the submittal process, which is how you pick your selections and actually agree upon a selection. The change order process, the scheduling process, and then invoicing. I think those 4 processes are typically the focus of communication. The submittal, what are we going to install? The change order, because typically if you have a submittal, that means you're working with an allowance. It means you haven't, which is normal. You haven't selected it up front. So that means there's going to be a change order, either positive or negative. How does that impact the schedule? Or how do other delays impact the schedule? Is the submittal been selected in time? I think your contractor, I mean, in a perfect world, your contractor would give you a list of deadline dates to when you would need to make those selections. And that's one of the major things to be talking to them about. I would also say it's always good to ask your contractors, or anything you need from me, anything that you need from me, because that is more communication is better. It's nice if you can figure out a communication pathway with your contractor too. I have some clients who love text messaging all day long, and I have other clients who will never ever text message and don't want to text message. I particularly have a portal that clients can look at, like their own website that has all that information, and some clients never want to go online. So it really is about figuring out, what is your communication pathway? Is it email? Is it a weekly phone call? Is it a site meeting? And what does that look like? And to arrange those expectations up front about when you will meet. If I have to drive out to a site and the site's 30 miles from my house to talk for 2 hours, that's going to have a cost impact as opposed to a Zoom meeting. A Zoom meeting is very easy, especially if you have plans.
Yeah, we're all creatures of Zoom now.
Yeah, I know. I thought I would hate it, but I actually love it now because it saves so much time.
Yeah. So that's that's interesting. You know, it ties in. Excuse me, that's my dog. She'll scratch the rest of the meeting if I don't let her in. Okay. You know, one of the things that we've heard about from designers, and what's great is a lot of this of what you're talking about was echoed by the design roundtable earlier, and about how the homeowner is part of the team as well in terms of communicating and helping make decisions. That it's not just hand everything over to the architect and builder and have them go. They're integral part to getting things done. One of the things that comes up, one of the things that I get asked a lot as well is you know, do I really need to get an architect? You know, I've got a GC. He designed my kitchen. He did a great job. Can't he just do the design? Or I've got a brother-in-law who's taking some CAD classes. Can't he just do the design? And I asked the designers this question as well. From the contractor's perspective, what is it like to deal with that issue of you know a designer design versus sort of seat of the pants kind of design? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think there's a cost associated with both of them. You know, if you hire an architect and full design team, you know, a lot of that cost is going to be more upfront. Whereas if you're going more seat of the pants, it's going to be spread out over the project. You know, if you're designing as you go, that can get out of hand very, very quick. And
this goes back to the change orders and changing the
Yeah.
design in the middle of the project being very expensive.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's good to have an architect and a design team, and you know, have, you know, it's even, you know, I think Dustin was saying it's a great way to find contractors, you know, and vice versa. You know, so if you find a contractor that you love, you know, ask them if they have a design, you know, architect and engineers that they like working with, and you know, so yeah, it is good. I mean, a designer, in the sense of like having an interior designer for it, might be a bit overkill for an ADU, you know, because it's such a small space and most of them are going to be rentals. So, you know, the people are going to do whatever they want to do when they move in. But definitely, you know, on the you know, architect engineer side, they are vital to the project and sort of keeping things moving from beginning to end.
Right. And Dustin, do you?
You know, I mean, I agree with Sky. I think a couple of things that the minimum requirements in both Sonoma and Napa County is going to eliminate a lot of your, I don't know what to call, you know, people who are doing it on Saturdays and stuff.
Right.
But there's a third class. There's what's called an architectural designer, and that is someone who maybe doesn't have their license. But you know, again, it's I don't want to say buyer beware, because I know some great architectural designers, and I believe we have some on the website.
We do.
Yeah, I believe Robin is an architectural designer.
Yep.
And I don't want to list off a bunch of names, but there are some people who have been doing it for 20 years, but it just have never bothered to get their license. But you just got to, you know, it has to do with that interview process. But definitely an architect is good, or a solid, experienced architectural designer, someone who can kind of prove what they've done, show you some pictures and some plans.
Right.
And then the
particularly
other thing,
if they have ADU experience, right? I mean, that's key.
And I'm going to go back to what Sky said. I think an architect, well, I think asking the ADU question, I was going to say the architect is important, but I think more important is, have they done ADUs? Because some architects do commercial buildings, right? Some do high rises or apartments, but an ADU is this particular little animal that that is not very well mapped out yet in our current administrative system. The getting a permit is not a clear path.
It's not a well-trodden path yet.
Yeah, so I think getting someone with ADU experience is really crucial.
Yeah. I want to jump to costs for a little bit. We've got about 5 minutes left before we go Q&A. And I know costs are one of those things where we can either talk about it all night or we can talk about it quickly because every project is different. But one of the things that comes up a lot, and so I'm going to lead with this, is the sort of, we've talked to them about the materials costs and labor costs kind of being through the roof over this last 18 months. But the thing that I get asked about a lot is cost per square foot. And I've said I say it in almost every conversation. We say it on webinars. Cost per square foot is a little bit counterintuitive when it comes to ADUs, and I think you guys might. I think you're the ones who are saying it's also a little problematic when it comes to ADUs. Do you want to I'll throw to Dustin first about what's cost per square foot good for? What should homeowners know the caveats on cost per square foot?
That's a good question. I get asked it all the time. I mean, the cost per square foot is, basically the cost divided by the livable, what's called conditioned space in your house. That's everything that is heated or cooled. And just mathematically speaking, the smaller the number is, the higher the square foot cost is. So I just did a 600 square foot ADU, and the price was, in fact, it was about 250,000, and the square foot cost on that is $416 a square foot. And then now I just bid a 900 square foot. Well, the reason that's so expensive though is because it also had a 600 square foot garage right underneath it. So basically I'm building 1,200 square feet, not 600 square feet. But to do the cost per square foot method, it put it at a really high square foot price.
Yeah.
Whereas I just bid one for someone for 900 square feet, and it came in around 290,000, and that's at 900 square feet, and that's $322 a square foot.
Right.
I mean, and $100 a square foot is a huge differential.
Yeah.
It's really not good for an initial interview question. I wouldn't start with my builder saying, how much can you build a house for? What's your square foot number? I wouldn't take offense at it, but some builders may perceive that as being offensive. It's more, I think, important when you're comparing builders' quotes. So let's say Sky and I were asked to bid on a project, and his cost came in at 250 a square foot, and mine came at 350 a square foot. That would be an indicator. Like the ratio is why is the square foot price so different? And that would be an indicator to go back through the estimate and figure out, okay, where are they different in their quotes? What's going on here?
In that case, it may be that the 350 a square foot, they don't have any way to calculate for materials costs 3 months from now, whereas the 250 a square foot is saying we're going to rebid it when we go to build. And so the 350 is building that price into the price per square foot price now, and hoping that it doesn't explode in their face later. So this is sort of the correlation between price per square foot, contracts, all that kind of stuff. That's why we want to talk about this kind of stuff, because I think it's hard for people to, if they've never done this, to get their heads around and see how the pieces interrelate. Scott, you want to jump in on the price per square foot issue?
Yeah, and I think price per square foot's really, kind of the only thing that I like using it for is kind of as a barometer for the client. Is just in the broadest of terms, for ADUs out there right now, I'm seeing most guys that I know talk about anywhere from 400 to 600 a square foot is sort of the average. And so if you take those numbers and you multiply it by what you want to build, and that number doesn't make you sick to your stomach, then maybe it's going to be okay. But beyond that,
it's sort of useful as an order of magnitude number.
Yeah.
When we started talking to homeowners, we were saying 325 a square foot. We pull our data from across the Bay Area of completed projects, and we kind of go for like where the bell curve of the number of completed projects starts to ramp up. And when we started last fall, it was about 325, and now it's about 350. And I'm expecting by the end of the summer, it's going to be about 400 is kind of the bottom bottom edge of where the price is going to be. And for some people, that's a huge surprise. They're expecting, you know, a 800 square foot ADU to cost $75,000. And so we use the price per square foot as a, you know, this is a really rough idea. This isn't about your project in particular, but here are kind of the number of zeros that you're going to have to play with. Is that possible? Can you move forward with that idea? And so it is really sort of a go, no go of, you know, it's not going to be $50,000 to build a detached ADU. It's probably going to be 150 to 350. And if that's okay, let's keep talking. So I think that's about where, beyond that, price per square foot starts to fall apart. But I can see comparing two bids, that could be a very, very good indicator, I think.
Yeah, I think something that's also important in terms of that is to find out what the start and stop line is for in pricing in general, but
Right.
also for that, because some people only include what's called sticks and bricks, right? So that's your foundation to roofing, and they don't include maybe dirt work, or they don't include general conditions, right? I have to have management on the job. I have to have a toilet. I have to have power boxes and cords, and I have to have a forklift, you know, all these
Right.
things. So what it's really important to get from your contractor is what the price includes. You know, does it include permit fees? Typically
Right.
not. But you know, but you have to pay them. So when you're looking at your overall price, it's very important to get that definition from your contractor. Where is the start and where is the stop for your contract?
Right. Very good point. Very good point. Okay, so it is. I'm going to wrap it up there. Any last thoughts before we go to Q&A? Anything you wish want homeowners to consider before they jump into their projects? Things that, you know, your years of wisdom in the trades can help them with.
Be patient, talk to people.
Yeah. Yeah. And know that your contractor's working hard for you. You know, even if, you know, beyond the 8 hours a day that you see them on site, everyone I know that's in the trades, you know, they're working their evenings and their weekends, making these things happen. And so be aware of that.
Right. All right. Well, that's a great place as any, I think, to jump to the question and answers. Looks like we've got 5. You can add questions as we go through these. I'll probably looks like I'm just skimming over a couple of them. Looks like we can throw them to both of you. Start one. This is actually a planning question. So I'll just handle it pretty quickly. John Hasek asks, can we have more than one ADU on our property as long as we maintain 40% open space? The short answer is no. You may be able to have a junior ADU if it's converted from existing interior space and a detached ADU. If you want to convert your garage first, maybe. It depends on the jurisdiction. But you can contact the ADU center and we can do a deeper dive on that question. So someone asked about pre-approved ADU plans. I know that there's a process in place process that's going through right now in the local area to get pre-approved plans that are pre-permitted, and that's a lot of P's. Have you guys worked in jurisdictions where they have pre-approved plans? Have you seen them play out in action?
I haven't dealt with any. I've looked at a lot that other jurisdictions have. I think San Jose has some, and down in Ventura, and then over by Sacramento, there was a couple of jurisdictions that had some. And I think with the pre-approved plans, it sort of falls into the same category as a manufactured or modular home, in that, you know, if what you want is what they're selling, it works great. If you're somebody who likes to change their mind and wants, you know, a lot of custom things, don't even bother, because where they shine is, you know, sort of the Henry Ford, you know, any color you want as long as it's black.
Yep.
We're great for that. Yeah, and I'm excited to see what happens with the. I think, yeah, I just saw today the email about the call for submissions for plans, so it'll be exciting.
Yeah. Dustin, have you had any experience with pre-approved plans?
No, well, no, not really. I just just to tag on, even if you do have a plan, like Sky was saying, a manufactured plan is typically one that goes through a different agency, governmental agency for approval. However, every plan has to run through your local permitting department in terms of a site plan, in terms of that particular jurisdiction, understanding where you're getting your utilities from, what the footprint is on the lot. So there still is some time and effort spent with drawing plans for your personal address where you're building.
Right. Right. Yeah. From what I've seen, sort of them get started is I think exactly as Sky has described is if you're fine with everything being exactly where it is, outlets to doorknobs to windows, that can, where there are pre-permitted plans, that can be a really good solution for some people. It's sort of a half step between that and buying a modular. But actually even with less modification than a modular in most cases. But I think if you have any changes, you say, oh, this is a great plan, but I want to have the closet on this side or the bedroom, over here. You have to hire a engineer and a designer and architect to redo those plans and redo those drawings, and you end up, I think, creating more work, and it's honestly less attractive to those professionals to jump into something that's someone else has already designed for them. So there is the right time for them, but I think that they're not always as easy as it sounds like when you first come across them. I hope that answers your question. We have someone who's asking, is it common to convert a garage to an ADU for homeowners to do an ADU as inexpensively as possible? Have you guys done garage conversions?
I've done one, but two, maybe two. We kind of incorporated into the house, but it was its own separate room where it wasn't this was kind of before junior ADUs were a thing, and it was just they were putting a family member out there. But it's definitely the cheapest because you don't have foundation and you don't have framing, or you have less framing.
Right.
There's currently an issue though with meeting the current Title 24 regulations, which Title 24 is basically the state's mandate for energy efficiency. You don't have a choice. You have to follow it. Everyone does. And to permit a junior ADU, sometimes there's some redundancies that get put in place to meet the Title 24 standards. But ultimately, it ends up being cheaper, I think, because you're not pouring a foundation, you're not adding a roof, you're not,
Yeah, and I've talked to people about at sort of the planning side of doing garage conversions, and I think a lot of it really depends on the age of your garage.
Yeah.
If your house is from the 1940s, like my house is, it's probably not going to be that much cheaper because my concrete's cracked and broken, and my framing is 2x4s. It's not going to hold enough insulation to pass Title 24. So retrofitting the garage, I get the double combo of losing my garage, but also spending a lot to get it up to current code. If I didn't have any other space on my property, in some cases, that's actually really common for people to have small lots. A garage conversion is still probably, unless you do an interior conversion off of a bedroom, a garage conversion is the cheapest way to go in most cases. But it also is, every ADU is individual. They're unique, and so your conditions of your garage may not make it as cheap as you hope. Or it maybe it was built in the last 10 years and it's going to be a no-brainer and be really easy,
Right.
particularly if you share a wall of the back of the garage with a bathroom or a kitchen already, to have the plumbing right there. Okay, let's see. This is a good question. To what extent can homeowners who are not contractors or in the trades do labor themselves to keep costs down?
Well, in the state of California, you as a homeowner are allowed to do, any repairs on your house. I think there's some restrictions around the HVAC stuff. But most everything else as an owner builder, you could do. If you're hiring a contractor, my recommendation would be to let them do what you hired them to do. And that in the long run, it may not save you as much money as you think, You know, it's sort of the old, you know, if you go to a restaurant, you know, you want the chef to make your meal and, you know, the waiter to come take your dishes away, and, you know, you bringing your own steak and potato isn't, you know, it's not going to save you anything. Um, so yeah, it's a tricky one because it also, it affects scheduling, it affects quality of work, it affects the warranty, you know, anything that the homeowner does, you know, as a contractor, I wouldn't warranty any work that they did. And a lot of people I know, you know, sort of have a philosophy of, you know, if the homeowner wants to work on it, they'll still charge for it because it's part of their project, and it's, you know, they're having to manage it, they're having to, you know, work around it, and they're having to clean up after it. So
Right.
it's a tricky one.
Yeah, it's a liability nightmare. It's you know, the liability for a contractor, you know, in the state of California, contractors in terms of their billing and working on a project have a lot of rights. But when a worker shows up to do something, the worker also has a lot of rights. And so it's just really, you know, if someone on the job gets hurt, I mean, what happens? You know, because
Right.
theoretically the owner's not covered by workers' comp. That would just be a nightmare. You know, sometimes I'll let the owners clean a project at the very, very end after everything is finished, but then I also stop my contract there,
Right.
and I exclude cleaning from the contract, and then my contract's over, and then they can clean. But that's about it. It's, you know, Sky said it good. Your contractor's a professional. Any nickels and dimes you're going to be able to save, unless you're a licensed electrician or a licensed plumber and have a contractor's license legal in the state of California. It's really, you know, it's, you're going to be in the way. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, from what I can tell, it feels like the best way for their homeowner to save money is to come up with a simple design and make as many decisions as possible and stick to those decisions throughout the design. You know, and go for the linoleum instead of the tile in the bathroom. Go for the fiberglass shower pan, and you know, save costs where you can, and just have your idea and run with it. That seems to be the best way to keep costs down, because the contractors in most cases and their subs are going to be able to get the work done, whether that's painting or installing cabinetry or doing the, you know, finished plumbing. They're likely to be able to get it done much faster than most homeowners who aren't in the trades.
You know, I had a construction management professor. I took some classes at our local Sonoma State, and he had the best analogy. It's construction is time and money, and the more time you spend up front, the more cost efficient a project is. The less time you spend up front, the less cost efficient a project is. And that's really the owner's job, is to spend that time making sure that we know what sink is going in, we know what kind of flooring it's going in. And the more you do that up front, the cheaper your project will be at the end, and then the quicker it'll be too.
Right. Right. I think that's great. Okay. We have someone here who's asking, they're thinking of moving their garage, which is on the property line, in 5 feet, and then adding a second story where the ADU would be over the garage. Have either of you seen or done a project like this? And can you explain the process and any issues that you've run into?
I've moved a few homes, and I've built some zero lot line stuff. It depends on, back to Scott, your comment about how old is it? Because if it's from the 1940s, built out of 2x4s, guess what? It's just going to be cheaper to tear it down
Right.
than it is. It really has to do with cost more than, you know, jacking up a structure is anywhere from, you know, a small structure maybe 6,000-7,000. A larger structure could be, you know, 10 to 12. And then moving it, that's fairly simple, and I've done that. But you know, what does the structure currently look like? This is a great question. This is a great time to bring in an architect and a builder at the same time, which honestly is my favorite combination, because you're going to have an architect to tell you what you can do, both legally and building wise, and then you have a builder there to tell you how much it's going to cost. And maybe you spend $300 or $400, and then you get your builder to price it out, and then you decide, well, I'm going to save 15, 20,000 just by tearing it down.
Right.
That's $300 or $400 well spent.
Maybe they can incorporate some part of it into the new build. Maybe they can
Exactly. Well, also too,
take the 2x4s and build a
lot of jurisdictions allow you to be 5 feet off the property line. So if your garage is on the property line, 0 lot line, most jurisdictions, if it's a legal 0 lot line, will allow you to come up off your existing structure and recess it back 5 feet. Sometimes it's 7 feet, sometimes it's 10 feet, depending on the jurisdiction. So there is a potential that you can leave your garage where it is if you're building on top of it. But again, this is where an architect or an experienced architectural designer will really be worth their weight in gold.
Yeah, it's a question that is, I think, ultimately it's really dependent upon that particular garage, that particular lot line, that particular jurisdiction about what's possible. It is possible, it's challenging, and the details of what that means depends really upon your property. Okay, last question looks like. Do either of you do modular construction? They ask for models and plans if you do, and pros or cons, deal breakers you have about modular construction. I'll throw it to Sky since Dustin had the last one.
I have worked on modular construction in the past. I'm not doing any currently. But the pros of it is that sort of you're getting something that's built in a factory, so it's a very much a known quantity, and for price, it's something that you're able to set up a contract with the company building it, and so from the get-go that it's going to be X amount of dollars for either if you're doing a panelized system, if you're doing like a hybrid core system, or if you're doing a completely prefab system. You get those different bits, and you have a set price with the contract, and so some people really like that because then it takes a little bit of the mystery out of the project. It's not great for sort of going back to what I was saying about the pre-approved plans is if you think you're going to want to change something, if you think you're going to want to do something different, it kind of defeats the whole purpose of having a modular building, because as soon as you change it, it's kind of like going back to square one, because depending on how you're doing it, I think so the panelized systems are looked at by the local building department, but if you're doing a completely modular building, it's looked at by the state through Title 25, different code, and so getting things changed there, it's a lot of work. But they are quicker, if you're able to, line everything up. It's sort of one of those things. If you can, get all the key components in place, it can go very, very quick, which is nice. So yeah.
Dustin, do you want to?
Yeah, I just recently completed a panelized home, and there's different levels of panelizing or panelization, if that's really even a word. Sometimes they come out with walls, frames. Sometimes they come out with walls and siding. Windows. Sometimes they come out with walls, windows, and siding. So I think I actually enjoyed it, and it ultimately it did save the owners a little money, and it did go a little bit quicker. But the communication, again, the communication was more intense as well, because you're bringing in another vendor who's doing work but is not on site, and so the starts and stops weren't 100% clear. And so in this particular case, we used a modular system, and they brought all their stuff, and they missed some parts. They forgot, because it's construction and that's what happens. And they shipped the wrong nails, and they forgot they shipped 2 of the wrong straps. So ultimately what had to happen is I had to go to the store and buy those things, which resulted in some time spent in a change order. But ultimately, they owner still saved money. I would still say I'm a proponent of a panelized system, again, with the proper amount of communication up front, and the reality that, that it's not coming from a computer, not yet anyway. And so stuff that shows up
There's still people involved.
there's still people involved, and they're just in a factory. We're offshoring our labor to the state of Oregon, typically, or Washington.
Right.
And yeah, and it's construction. So even in that situation, there's going to be stuff that's wrong. And the owner in this case was able to actually take some of the nails back and get a credit from the manufacturing company. But it's, again, communication.
Yeah, these are really complex projects. It's
Yeah.
hard not to overstate that all the little details, because I think building in California is so regulated, so safe, so engineered that the strapping, the types of nails used, all that stuff really matters, because you could fail your inspection if you don't have it there, and that puts you back even farther. And so it's that sort of, and there are thousands of those kinds of details on every build, if you're 120 square feet or 1,000 square feet or 10,000 square feet. And that's hard to if you haven't been through that process, if you don't live in that process like you two do every day, it's hard to fathom just how many decisions, how many details have to be right in order for things to go forward, and get done on time. I think we have some folks who are pricing modulars versus traditional construction, and we found that once you get through with the site work and the foundations and the utilities and the trenching and everything else, you save about 10% maybe on cost, depending on a comparable. But really, like, as you said, it really comes down to your timeline. You can really collapse the timeline, but the big caveat is that you have to have a really good, reputable company that you're working with. I did research on modulars several years ago when I first was getting interested in this idea of ADUs as being viable, and I recently went back to research them again to see who would be a good fit for our vendor list. And a lot of the vendors I looked at in 2017, they're not around.
Yep.
And so if you bought your house from somebody and they have a 10-year warranty, then they're gone 2 years later. That's not great. So I think with modulars, because they're often remote, because it can be hard to really see the product they put out, not on the internet, it really is up to the homeowner to do their due diligence and make sure they know what they're getting and they're getting what they want to be getting. That said, for the right project, for the right fit, it is absolutely amazing how quickly one of these things can go together, how beautifully finished a fully built modular can be as it comes off of a truck, that the build time can be so short. It's sort of head spinning how quickly. So yeah, there's goods and bads. And with that, I think that answers our questions. So I want to thank you guys both for being here tonight. I want to say that the Napa Sonoma ADU Center, we hold webinars pretty regularly. All of the previous ones are available. We have them recorded on demand on our website, and you're able to view any of them at any time. We'll have more webinars coming this fall. And I want to say that, we at the ADU Center, we're here to help. We encourage you to visit our website and sign up for our newsletter. You can connect with us on social media, stay up to date with our new resources information that we are putting out every month. We have other events. So we have got Napa Sonoma, ADU.org. Stay in touch is a great place to start with us. It's also a good idea to if you're considering your ADU and you're not quite there yet, reach out to us as you go through the process, because as Dustin said, the ADU path is not well trodden yet. And the cities and the state are sort of refining what the rules are as they go along. And there are clarifications being made all the time that sort of can maybe trip one project from being, not possible to being viable. It's always important to make sure that you can get information specific to your parcel and your project because that stuff can change over time. Everything we've shared with you today is information. None of it is legal advice. None of it is engineering advice, and none of it is advice for your specific project. We can do that, one-on-one. I want to thank our supporters. As I said, Napa Sonoma ADU is a fiscally sponsored project of Napa Valley Community Foundation with support from the Community Foundation of Sonoma County, as well as from the cities of Napa, Calistoga, and the County of Napa, among others. We want to thank you, Dustin and Sky, for being here tonight, taking time out of your Thursday evening, and thank for you, all of you who joined us from home and watched us talk about building stuff. We'll be posting this video probably in the next week. It should be on our website again very soon. We hope this has been informative. We hope this has been helpful. We'd love to hear your feedback. We look forward to seeing you again at our next webinar. And if you can, please stay on for a little bit longer and complete the post-webinar feedback survey. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.